The first gunshot cracked through the sterile air of St. Catherine's Community Hospital like thunder on a clear day. Maya Rodriguez had exactly 3 seconds to process what she was hearing before her world exploded into chaos. She'd been standing at the nurse's station in the pediatric ICU, finally ready to clock out after a brutal 16-hour shift. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, her scrubs stuck to her back with sweat, and all she wanted was to go home to her tiny apartment, kiss her sleeping mother goodnight, and collapse into bed. At 26, Maya had been pulling these marathon shifts for 3 years, ever since she'd graduated nursing school and started working to pay off her loans while supporting her mother Maria, who cleaned office buildings downtown for $12 an hour. The second gunshot made the children scream. Maya's blood turned to ice as the sound registered. Not a car backfiring, not construction noise. Gunshots. In her hospital. In the pediatric wing where 6 critically ill children lay connected to life support machines, where parents kept vigil in uncomfortable chairs, where the night shift was down to skeleton crew because the hospital had cut costs again. Code Silver. Code Silver. Lockdown initiated. The announcement blared from speakers throughout the hospital, but Maya was already moving. Not toward the exits like protocol demanded. Not toward safety like common sense screamed. Toward the children. The pediatric ICU held 6 beds arranged in a semicircle around the central monitoring station. Tonight, all 6 were occupied. Keisha Webb, 8, recovering from heart surgery. Tommy Martinez, 5, battling leukemia. Sarah Chen, 11, waiting for a kidney transplant. David Johnson, 7, born with severe asthma. Lisa Park, 6, in treatment for a brain tumor. And Marcus Williams, 4, fighting a rare blood disorder. Each child was tethered to machines that beeped and hummed with the rhythm of fragile life. Maya heard footsteps pounding down the hallway, growing closer. Heavy boots, shouting voices. Not security, she knew the sound of their soft-soled shoes and calm, trained movements. This was different. This was violence approaching with purpose. She looked at the 6 beds, at the sleeping faces of children who depended on her, and made a choice that would change everything. When the gunman burst through the double doors of the pediatric ICU, assault rifle raised and eyes wild with whatever rage had brought him here, he found Maya Rodriguez standing in the center of the room, arms spread wide, her small frame blocking his line of sight to the children behind her. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Please don't hurt them. They're just babies." The gunman was young, maybe 20, with acne scars and dead eyes, and the kind of rage that comes from a lifetime of feeling invisible. He wore a black hoodie and military-style pants, and Maya could see his finger tight on the trigger of a weapon that looked like something from a war zone, not a children's hospital. "Get out of my way," he snarled. But Maya stood her ground. No. Behind her, the children were stirring. Keisha Webb, the 8-year-old with the bright smile and the heart condition, was awake and watching with enormous dark eyes. Tommy Martinez was crying softly, his bald head shiny under the fluorescent lights. The machines continued their electronic symphony of life support, beeping, humming, breathing for tiny lungs that couldn't work alone. Maya heard sirens in the distance, but they sounded impossibly far away. Security would come eventually, but eventually meant nothing when you were staring down the barrel of a rifle wielded by someone who had already decided that today was a good day to hurt innocent people. "I won't move," Maya said, taking a half-step closer to the gunman, further from the children. If he was going to shoot, better that the bullets found her than them. "You want to hurt someone? Hurt me. But you're not touching these kids." The first bullet caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending fire through her entire arm. The impact was like being hit by a baseball bat swung by a giant, and Maya gasped as she felt the warm spread of blood soaking through her scrubs. But she didn't go down. She straightened up, turned back to face the gunman, and planted her feet even more firmly between him and the children. "Please," she said again, her voice weaker now, but still determined. "They didn't do anything to you. They're just sick babies trying to get better." Behind her, she could hear Keisha crying now, calling for her mama. Tommy was hyperventilating, and the monitors were going crazy as the children's vital signs spiked with terror. Maya wanted to turn around, to comfort them, but she didn't dare take her eyes off the gunman. The second bullet hit her in the abdomen, just below her ribs. This time Maya did stagger, her knees buckling as agony exploded through her core. She tasted copper in her mouth and felt wetness spreading across her stomach, but she used the monitoring station to pull herself upright, still standing between the gunman and the children. "Maya!" That was Dr. Elizabeth Harper's voice, screaming from somewhere near the doors. Her supervisor, her mentor, the woman who had believed in her when no one else would. Maya, get down! But Maya shook her head, even though the movement sent fresh waves of pain through her skull. I'm okay, she called back, though blood was running down her chin now. I'm okay. Call security. Get the parents. The gunman was staring at her now, with something that might have been confusion. Maybe no one had ever stood up to him before. Maybe he was used to people running, screaming, begging for their own lives instead of protecting others. Why won't you move? He demanded, his voice cracking like an adolescent's. Maya tried to smile, though it came out more like a grimace. Because they're babies, she whispered, and someone has to protect babies. The third bullet hit her in the thigh, shattering bone and sending her crashing to the floor. This time Maya screamed, a sound she'd never made before in her life, raw and animal and desperate. But even as she fell, she crawled forward on her hands and knees, leaving a trail of blood on the white linoleum, positioning herself between the gunman and the closest bed where little Marcus Williams was crying for his mama. It's okay, baby, Maya gasped, reaching up to touch Marcus's tiny hand while keeping her eyes on the gunman. Maya's here. Maya's not going anywhere. She could hear footsteps now, running feet, shouting voices, the controlled chaos of security finally arriving. The gunman heard it too, his head whipping toward the doors as uniformed officers burst through with weapons drawn and voices raised in commands. Maya couldn't quite make out through the ringing in her ears. Drop the weapon. Get on the ground. Now. 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 The rest happened fast. The gunman, faced with real opposition instead of unarmed nurses and sick children, threw down his rifle and hit the floor with his hands behind his head. Security swarmed him while paramedics rushed into the room, their voices urgent and professional. We've got a GSW to the shoulder, abdomen and thigh. Female, mid-20s, conscious and responsive. Maya, can you hear me? Maya, stay with us. She could hear them, but they sounded far away, like voices calling from across a vast distance. Maya tried to focus on their faces as they worked over her, cutting away her blood-soaked scrubs and pressing gauze to her wounds, but her vision was getting dark around the edges. The kids, she whispered as they lifted her onto a stretcher. Check the kids first. The children are fine, one of the paramedics told her, his voice gentle but firm. You saved them. Every single one of them is fine because of you. As they wheeled her through the hallways toward the elevator, Maya caught a glimpse of the chaos her heroism had unleashed. News vans were already pulling into the hospital parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like electronic flowers. Police cars filled the emergency vehicle bays, their lights painting the walls in red and blue. Hospital administrators in expensive suits were clustered near the information desk, their faces grim as they spoke in urgent whispers. Maya Rodriguez, the quiet nurse from Detroit who just wanted to help sick children get better, had no idea that her 3 bullets would trigger a war. Richard Blackstone received the call at 11:47 p.m. while sipping a 300 bottle of wine in his Grosse Pointe mansion. The CEO of St. Catherine's Community Hospital had been expecting a quiet evening reviewing quarterly profit reports, not a crisis that could destroy everything he'd spent 5 years building. How many casualties? He barked into his phone, already reaching for his car keys. 1 injured staff member, no civilian casualties, his head of security Jim Walsh reported. But we've got a problem, Mr. Blackstone. The nurse who got shot, she deliberately put herself between the gunman and the pediatric patients. The whole thing was caught on security cameras. Blackstone's blood pressure spiked. A hero nurse. Security footage. Pediatric patients. This was a public relations nightmare that could cost the hospital millions in lawsuits, insurance claims, and worst of all, lost revenue from families who might choose other hospitals for their children's care. I'm on my way, he said, hanging up in speed, dialing his lawyer. By the time Blackstone arrived at St. Catherine's, the hospital was crawling with police, paramedics, and the first wave of reporters. He pushed through the crowd in the lobby, his Armani suit and commanding presence parting the chaos like a ship through waves. At 53, Blackstone had the kind of polished appearance that board members loved: silver hair, expensive smile, and the ability to make cost-cutting sound like compassion for taxpayers. He found Walsh and the hospital's legal team huddled in a conference room near the administrative offices. Patricia Morse from the insurance company was already on speakerphone, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Tell me we can contain this, Blackstone said without preamble. Walsh, a former Detroit police officer who'd been hired more for his willingness to follow orders than his actual security expertise, pulled up the footage on his tablet. Here's what we're dealing with. The video showed everything. Maya Rodriguez, small and determined, standing between an armed gunman and 6 hospitalized children, taking 3 bullets, falling but still crawling to protect the kids. It was the kind of footage that would make national news, win awards, and most importantly, for Blackstone's purposes, make the hospital look criminally negligent for allowing an armed man to reach the pediatric ICU in the first place. "How did he get past security?" demanded Patricia Morse over the speakerphone. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "The metal detectors at the main entrance were offline for maintenance. We've been using them intermittently for the past 6 months to save on electricity costs." The silence in the room was deafening. Blackstone felt his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. 6 months of disabled security systems. A gunman who walked through their hospital like it was a shopping mall. A nurse who had to take 3 bullets because hospital security wasn't there to protect patients. "What's the nurse's condition?" asked David Sterling, the hospital's chief legal counsel. "Stable but critical," Walsh reported. "She's in surgery now. Maya Rodriguez, 26 years old, been here 3 years. Clean record, well-liked by staff and families." "Good," Blackstone said, his mind already working through damage control scenarios. "That means she's not a troublemaker. We can work with that." Patricia Morse's voice crackled through the speaker. "Richard, I need to be very clear about something. Our insurance policy has specific language about liability in cases of workplace violence. If it can be proven that the hospital was negligent in security protocols—" "It can't be proven," Blackstone interrupted firmly. "Because we weren't negligent. We followed all applicable guidelines. This was an unprecedented attack by a disturbed individual, and our staff responded heroically within the scope of their training." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Richard, the security footage shows a brave nurse who exceeded her job responsibilities in a crisis situation," Blackstone said smoothly. "It also shows that our security team responded appropriately once they were alerted to the situation." Walsh nodded slowly, understanding his role. "That's right. Officer Martinez and I followed standard protocols for active shooter situations. We contained the threat and protected civilians." "What about the disabled metal detectors?" Sterling pressed. Blackstone's smile was cold. "Routine maintenance, properly documented. There's no law requiring hospitals to have metal detectors, David. We go above and beyond what's required because we care about our patients' safety." Patricia Morse's voice was skeptical. "And the nurse? Maya Rodriguez? What's our exposure there?" "Minimal," Blackstone lied smoothly. "She acted outside her job description, which could actually complicate her workers' compensation claim. Nurses are trained to evacuate and seek help in emergency situations, not to confront armed intruders." The legal team exchanged glances. This was dangerous territory, but they understood the game. St. Catherine's was part of Medicorp, a billion-dollar hospital chain with facilities across the Midwest. A major lawsuit here could trigger a cascade of similar claims at other hospitals. Stock prices could tumble, board members could lose millions. "So what's our strategy?" Sterling asked. Blackstone pulled up a chair and leaned forward like a general planning a battle. "First, we control the narrative. This was a tragic incident that could have happened anywhere. Our security responded appropriately. Our staff showed courage under pressure. We're reviewing all protocols to ensure something like this never happens again." "What about Rodriguez?" "We support her fully, of course. She's a valued member of our team who went above and beyond. But we don't want to create unrealistic expectations for other staff members. We can't have nurses thinking they're supposed to fight armed criminals that's not safe for anyone." Walsh nodded eagerly. "I can work that angle with the police. Emphasize that civilians shouldn't engage active shooters. It's dangerous and could have made things worse." "Exactly," Blackstone agreed. "We frame this as a cautionary tale about the importance of following proper emergency protocols." Patricia Morse's voice was thoughtful. "What about media coverage? If this goes national—" "It won't," Blackstone said confidently. "Local news will cover it for a day or two, then move on to the next story. We just need to make sure we don't feed the fire with dramatic statements about heroism and sacrifice." Sterling was taking notes. "I'll draft talking points for all department heads. Emphasize professionalism, protocol, and measured response." "Good. And David? Make sure Rodriguez understands that any public statements should go through our media relations department. We don't want conflicting narratives confusing people." 3 floors above them, Maya Rodriguez was waking up from surgery. The anesthesia was wearing off slowly, leaving her groggy and disoriented as she tried to focus on the unfamiliar ceiling tiles. Her shoulder ached with a deep, throbbing pain that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her abdomen was wrapped in thick bandages that made it hard to breathe deeply. Maya? Mija, can you hear me? She turned her head carefully, because movement sent sparks of pain through her skull, and saw her mother's worried face. Maria Rodriguez looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. Her graying hair was disheveled, her work uniform wrinkled from sleeping in an uncomfortable chair. Mama? Maya's voice came out as a croak. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Maria gripped Maya's uninjured hand like a lifeline. The doctors say you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Maya tried to remember what had happened. The gunman, the children, the sound of bullets and screaming. The kids, are they? All safe, Maria said quickly. All 6 children are perfectly fine because of you. You saved them, Maya. You saved those babies. Relief flooded through Maya like warm honey. That was all that mattered. The children were safe. But as consciousness fully returned, other concerns began to surface. Medical bills, time off work. Her mother would have to take unpaid leave to care for her, which meant no income for either of them. Mama, how are we going to? Don't worry about money right now, Maria said firmly. Just focus on getting better. But Maya could see the fear in her mother's eyes. They lived paycheck to paycheck even when Maya was working full-time. A major medical event like this could bankrupt them both. What Maya didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that 4 floors below, the executives who controlled her fate were already planning to abandon her. Maya returned to consciousness the next morning to find Dr. Elizabeth Harper sitting beside her bed, but something was wrong. Dr. Harper, who had mentored Maya through her first terrifying months as a pediatric nurse, looked haggard and defeated. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. Elizabeth? Maya tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. What's wrong? You look terrible. Dr. Harper managed a weak smile. Thanks for the bedside manner, kiddo. I've had better days. The kids are really okay, all of them? They're perfect, thanks to you. Dr. Harper's voice was warm with genuine affection. Keisha Webb keeps asking when she can see Angel Maya. Her parents are beside themselves with gratitude. Relief washed over Maya again, but she could sense there was more. But, Dr. Harper hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Maya, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. The hospital administration, they're not handling this the way they should. Before Maya could ask what that meant, the door opened, and Richard Blackstone swept in like he owned the place, which, Maya supposed, he essentially did. The CEO was followed by a man Maya didn't recognize. Someone in an expensive suit who had the predatory look of a lawyer. Miss Rodriguez, Blackstone's voice boomed with false warmth. How are we feeling today? I wanted to check on our brave nurse personally. Maya instinctively distrusted the man's smile. It reminded her of the smiles politicians wore when they visited the pediatric ward for photo opportunities, all teeth and no sincerity. I'm fine, she said cautiously. Thank you for coming. Of course, of course. This is David Sterling, our chief legal counsel. He has some paperwork that will help streamline your recovery process. Sterling stepped forward with a leather folder. Miss Rodriguez, we've prepared some documents that will ensure your medical expenses are handled properly and protect both you and the hospital during the investigation process. Dr. Harper stiffened. What kind of documents? Standard liability waivers and non-disclosure agreements, Sterling said smoothly. Nothing unusual. Just to prevent any misunderstandings or conflicting narratives that might complicate Miss Rodriguez's workers' compensation claim. Maya's mother had been quiet in the corner, but now she spoke up. What does that mean in English? Blackstone's smile grew wider. It means Maya doesn't have to worry about anything except getting better. We handle all the legal complexities, and she focuses on her recovery. I'd like to read them first, Maya said. Sterling's expression flickered with annoyance. Of course. Though I should mention that time is a factor here. Insurance companies prefer to have documentation completed quickly after incidents like this. Dr. Harper stood up abruptly. Gentlemen, I think Maya needs to rest now. Perhaps you could come back later? Actually, Blackstone said, his tone becoming cooler. Dr. Harper, I'd like to speak with you about staffing adjustments. Given the incident, we need to review our protocols for pediatric coverage. It was clearly a dismissal, and Dr. Harper recognized it as such. She squeezed Maya's hand. I'll be back later, she said, but her eyes were worried. After Dr. Harper left, Blackstone's demeanor shifted subtly. The warm smile remained, but his eyes grew calculating. Maya? May I call you Maya? I want you to understand something. What happened yesterday was tragic, but it could have been much worse. The important thing now is that we don't let lawyers and insurance companies turn this into something it wasn't. I don't understand, Maya said. Sterling leaned forward. The hospital has certain legal obligations and insurance requirements. If the incident is characterized in certain ways, it could create liability issues that ultimately harm the hospital's ability to serve patients like those children you protected. Maya's head was starting to pound. The medication they'd given her was wearing off, and the conversation was taking a turn that made her deeply uncomfortable. Are you saying I did something wrong? Not at all. Blackstone's voice was hearty with false reassurance. You acted with tremendous courage. But courage isn't always the same thing as following proper protocols. Our insurance company needs to understand that you acted independently, outside the scope of your normal duties. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. You're saying that protecting those children wasn't part of my job? Technically speaking, Sterling said carefully. Nursing staff are trained to evacuate and seek help in emergency situations. Confronting armed individuals is outside the scope of standard nursing responsibilities. Maria Rodriguez might have worked as a cleaning lady, but she wasn't stupid. She'd raised a daughter on her own by learning to recognize when people were trying to take advantage of them. You're trying to make it sound like Maya did something wrong so you don't have to pay her medical bills. Blackstone's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Mrs. Rodriguez, I understand emotions are running high, but we need to think about what's best for everyone involved. The hospital, the patients we serve, and Maya's future career. My future career? Sterling nodded gravely. The Michigan State Board of Nursing takes a dim view of healthcare workers who act outside their scope of practice. If this incident is reported as a violation of emergency protocols, it could impact your license. Maya felt the world tilting around her. They were threatening her nursing license, her ability to work, to support her mother, to do the only job she'd ever wanted to do, all because she'd saved 6 children's lives. This is insane, she whispered. It's reality, Blackstone said, his voice finally dropping its pretense of warmth. Healthcare is a complex business, Maya. Sometimes doing what feels right in the moment creates problems that affect thousands of other patients down the line. Before Maya could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Angry voices, someone crying, the sound of security guards trying to maintain order. Through her open door, Maya could see Jim Walsh, the head of security, escorting a well-dressed black couple toward the elevators. I'm sorry, Walsh was saying, but visiting hours are restricted right now. Hospital policy. We just want to thank her, the woman was crying. She saved our daughter's life. Maya recognized them now, Keisha Webb's parents. They'd been at Keisha's bedside every day during her heart surgery, and Maya had grown fond of their quiet dignity and fierce love for their daughter. Let them in, Maya called out, but Walsh pretended not to hear her. Blackstone watched the scene with cold satisfaction. As I was saying, Maya, sometimes we need to think about the bigger picture. Sign the documents, take the settlement, and move on with your life. It's better for everyone. And if I don't? Sterling's smile was shark-like. Then you'll be dealing with insurance companies, licensing boards, and legal challenges for years to come. Medical bills that could bankrupt you and your mother. Potential criminal charges for acting outside your scope of practice during a crisis situation. Maya's mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. You people make me sick. My daughter takes bullets to save babies, and you threaten her for it? We're trying to help her, Blackstone said smoothly. But help requires cooperation. After they left, Maya lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and trying to process what had just happened. She'd always known that hospitals were businesses as well as places of healing, but she'd never imagined that saving children's lives could be treated as a liability problem. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Detective Sarah Chen, Detroit PD. I was first responder yesterday. Can we talk? There are things you need to know about what really happened. Maya stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes, please come. 3 hours later, Detective Chen sat in the same chair that Richard Blackstone had occupied, but the atmosphere in the room was completely different. Chen was a compact woman in her 30s with intelligent eyes and the kind of quiet competence that made Maya trust her immediately. How much do you know about what happened before the shooting? Chen asked. Nothing, really. I was just trying to clock out when... The hospital's metal detectors had been offline for 6 months, Chen interrupted. Not for maintenance, to save money on electricity costs. The security guard who was supposed to be monitoring the pediatric wing was covering 3 floors because they'd cut the overnight security staff in half. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. They knew? They knew the building wasn't secure. They knew they were understaffed. They made those decisions to improve profit margins. Chen's voice was quietly furious. And when someone finally got hurt because of those decisions, their first move was to blame the victim. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been a cop for 12 years, and I've never seen anything as brave as what you did yesterday. And because I've also never seen a more disgusting display of corporate cowardice than what your hospital is doing now. Maya was quiet for a long moment. What do I do? Detective Chen smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. You fight back. The first sign that Richard Blackstone had miscalculated came 3 days after the shooting, when Jennifer Walsh, wife of the hospital's head of security, stood up at a PTA meeting and told 47 parents exactly what had happened in the pediatric ICU. Jennifer was not the kind of woman anyone expected to start a revolution. At 38, she was a suburban mother of two who drove a minivan, volunteered for school fundraisers, and had never missed a dentist appointment in her life. Her husband, Jim, brought home a steady paycheck from the hospital. They had good health insurance, and their biggest worry had been saving enough money to replace their aging roof. But Jennifer Walsh had been present during her daughter Sophia's appendectomy 2 years earlier. She'd met Maya Rodriguez then, watched the young nurse stay late to comfort a scared little girl, seen the genuine compassion in Maya's eyes when she promised Sophia that everything would be okay. And Jennifer Walsh had a conscience. They're trying to destroy her, she told the assembled parents, her voice shaking with anger. This girl took 3 bullets to save children babies, and the hospital is threatening to ruin her life because she didn't follow their precious protocols. The room erupted in outrage. These were parents who understood, on a primal level, what Maya had done. Every mother and father in that room had lain awake at night, worried about their children's safety, had nightmare scenarios about what they would do if someone tried to hurt their kids. What can we do? Asked Patricia Morris, whose son had been treated by Maya for a broken arm the previous year. We fight, Jennifer said simply. We organize. We make sure everyone knows what really happened and what the hospital is trying to do about it. Within hours, the hashtag #MayaTheShield was trending on local social media. Parents shared stories of Maya's kindness, her competence, her genuine love for the children in her care. Hospital workers speaking anonymously out of fear for their jobs confirmed that security had been cut, that equipment was frequently offline for maintenance, that staff had been raising concerns about safety for months. The story caught the attention of Rosa Martinez, an investigative journalist for the Detroit Free Press, who specialized in healthcare corruption. Rosa had been following Medicorp's cost-cutting measures across their hospital chain, documenting how profit-maximizing strategies were affecting patient care. This is exactly the pattern I've been tracking, Rosa explained to her editor. They cut security, cut staff, cut maintenance. Then when something goes wrong, they blame the workers who try to fix the problems they created. But when Rosa called St. Catherine's for comment, she got a masterclass in corporate damage control. Patricia Morse, the hospital's media relations specialist, had prepared a statement that turned Maya from hero to problem. While we appreciate the courage shown by our staff member, we cannot encourage healthcare workers to exceed their training and put themselves in harm's way. Ms. Rodriguez's actions, while well-intentioned, violated established emergency protocols designed to protect both staff and patients. We are working with law enforcement and insurance agencies to ensure proper procedures are followed in the future. The statement made Rosa's blood boil. She'd seen this before: corporations that created dangerous conditions, then blamed their own employees when those conditions led to disasters. But Rosa had resources that suburban mothers and outraged parents didn't. She had contacts at the state health department who could pull inspection reports. She had sources at the police department who could confirm details about the hospital's security failures. And she had access to public records that could reveal the true financial picture behind Medicorp's cost-cutting measures. What she found was even worse than she'd expected. St. Catherine's had received 3 citations from the state health department in the past 18 months for security-related violations. They'd been operating with minimal overnight staffing for nearly 2 years. The metal detectors that had been offline for maintenance had actually been disconnected to reduce electricity costs by an estimated $2,400 per month. Meanwhile, Medicorp had reported record profits for the past 3 quarters. CEO bonuses were up 30%. The company had spent $50 million on new administrative facilities while cutting $8 million in operational expenses that included security, maintenance, and nursing staff. They prioritized profits over children's safety, Rosa told her editor, and now they're trying to scapegoat the nurse who risked her life to fix their failures. The story ran on the front page of the Sunday paper with the headline, "Hero Nurse Faces Retaliation for Saving Children's Lives." It included a photo of Maya in her hospital bed, looking pale but determined, surrounded by get-well cards from the families of the children she'd protected. The public response was immediate and furious. By Monday morning, protesters had gathered outside St. Catherine's main entrance. They carried signs reading, "Maya is a hero," and "Fire Blackstone, not Maya." Local TV news trucks lined the street, interviewing parents who shared stories of Maya's compassion and professionalism. Inside the hospital, Richard Blackstone was dealing with a crisis that was spiraling beyond his control. Board members were calling, demanding explanations. Medicorp's stock price had dropped 2% overnight. The protesters were disrupting business and frightening patients. "How did this happen?" he demanded during an emergency meeting with his senior staff. "I thought we had this contained." Jim Walsh looked miserable. He'd known his wife was upset about the situation, but he hadn't realized she was actively organizing opposition to the hospital's strategy. "My wife," he admitted reluctantly, "she's been talking to other parents, organizing social media campaigns." Blackstone's face went red. "Your wife is sabotaging this hospital's reputation, and you didn't think to mention it?" "I tried to talk to her," Walsh protested. "She won't listen. She says Maya saved those kids and deserves better." "Fire her," Blackstone snapped. "If your wife wants to cause problems for this hospital, she can find somewhere else to volunteer. She doesn't work for the hospital, sir. She's just a volunteer." "Then ban her from the premises. Issue a trespassing warning if necessary." David Sterling cleared his throat nervously. "Richard, that might not be wise. If we start targeting family members of employees, it could look like retaliation." But Blackstone was beyond caring about appearances. The situation was threatening everything he'd built: his reputation, his career, his bonus structure that depended on maintaining profit margins and avoiding bad publicity. "I want this contained," he said flatly, "whatever it takes." Meanwhile, 3 floors up in the pediatric ICU, Maya was receiving visitors that the administration would have been horrified to know about. The parents of the 6 children she'd saved had formed an informal support network, taking turns sitting with her when her mother had to work, bringing food and flowers and stories about how their children were recovering. Marcus Webb, Keisha's father, had flown in from Atlanta, where he worked as a pharmaceutical executive. He was a quiet man who spoke softly but carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to making important decisions. "I've been watching the news," he told Maya. "This is not right what they're doing to you." "I just want to go back to work," Maya said wearily. "I want to take care of kids and pretend none of this ever happened." Marcus studied her face. "That's not going to be possible now. This is bigger than just you in the hospital. People are watching, and they're angry. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted those babies to be safe. And they are safe because of you. My Keisha is alive because you were willing to die for her." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "That means something, Maya. That means everything." Outside Maya's window, the protesters' chants could be heard even through the thick glass. "Maya, Maya, Maya!" The sound was both encouraging and overwhelming, the voice of a community that had decided to stand up for one of their own. But Maya didn't know that her story was about to reach far beyond Detroit, that sympathetic healthcare workers in other cities were organizing their own demonstrations, that politicians were beginning to take notice of a story that perfectly illustrated the conflict between corporate profits and human decency. She didn't know that in exactly 18 hours, her doorbell would ring and change everything forever. Maya had been home for exactly 48 hours when the doorbell rang at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. She was lying on the worn couch in their tiny apartment, trying to find a comfortable position that didn't put pressure on her healing wounds, when the sound made her jump. Her mother was at work. They couldn't afford for Maria to take more time off, and Maya had insisted she could manage alone for a few hours. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of their ancient air conditioning unit and the distant sound of traffic on 8 Mile Road. Maya struggled to her feet, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. She'd been home long enough to develop a routine: shuffle slowly to avoid jarring her injuries, lean on furniture when possible, and never trust that she was as steady as she felt. Through the peephole, she saw a well-dressed black man in an expensive suit, holding a small bouquet of flowers. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot and checking his phone repeatedly. Maya's first thought was that he must be another lawyer or hospital administrator, and her heart sank. She'd already received 2 more visits from David Sterling, each one more threatening than the last, and a call from someone claiming to represent her insurance company who'd asked pointed questions about her reckless behavior. But something about this man's demeanor was different. He wasn't standing with the predatory confidence of the lawyers or the false sympathy of the hospital executives. He looked genuinely anxious, like someone gathering courage for a difficult conversation. Maya opened the door cautiously, leaving the security chain attached. "Can I help you?" The man looked up, and Maya saw that his eyes were red-rimmed, as if he'd been crying. "Are you Maya Rodriguez, the nurse from St. Catherine's?" "Yes," she said warily. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Webb," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think you saved my daughter's life." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled with the security chain, suddenly desperate to open the door properly. Marcus Webb, that was Keisha's father. She remembered him from the hospital, remembered how he'd sat by his daughter's bedside reading story after story in a soft, patient voice. "Mr. Webb, is Keisha okay? How did you find my address?" Marcus smiled through his tears. "Keisha is perfect. She's been asking about you every day, and your address. I hired a private investigator. I hope you don't mind. I needed to find you." Maya opened the door fully, ignoring the pain in her shoulder as she gestured for him to come in. Their apartment was embarrassingly small and shabby compared to what Marcus Webb was probably used to mismatched furniture from thrift stores, water stains on the ceiling, the pervasive smell of the restaurant downstairs, but he didn't seem to notice. "Please, sit down," Maya said, settling carefully back onto the couch. "How is Keisha? Really?" "She's wonderful. The heart surgery was completely successful, and she's been home for 2 days now, but that's not why I'm here." Marcus sat forward in his chair, his hands clasped tightly together. "Maya, I need you to understand something. When that man came into the ICU with a gun, my daughter was scheduled for another surgery the next morning. She was weak, connected to machines, completely vulnerable." Maya nodded, remembering. "She was such a brave little girl. She kept asking if her parents were okay. If you hadn't been there," Marcus continued, his voice breaking, "if you hadn't put yourself between him and those children, Keisha would be dead. My baby would be dead." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of might-have-beens. Maya had thought about this constantly during her recovery, replaying the shooting in her mind, wondering if she could have done anything differently. But hearing it from Keisha's father made it real in a way that cut through all her doubts. "I just did what anyone would do," she said quietly. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You did what a hero does. And now I need to tell you something else." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what came next. "Maya, I'm not just Keisha's father. I'm the executive vice president for strategic development at Phoenix Pharmaceuticals." Maya stared at him blankly. The name meant nothing to her. Marcus smiled sadly. "We're one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. We supply medications to hospitals across the Midwest, including St. Catherine's. My personal net worth is approximately $50 million. The number was so large that Maya couldn't quite process it. $50 million was more money than she could imagine, more than her mother would earn in 20 lifetimes of cleaning offices. "I don't understand," she said. "For 3 days," Marcus continued, "I've been watching the news, reading the stories about what the hospital is doing to you. They're trying to destroy the woman who saved my child's life, and I've been sitting in Atlanta in my comfortable office doing nothing about it." He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over the parking lot behind their building. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone threaten the person who gave you back your daughter? To know that you have the resources to help, but you've been too much of a coward to act?" "Mr. Webb, Marcus, please." He turned back to face her. "Maya, I came here to offer you my help, not charity help, because I owe you everything, and because what the hospital is doing to you is not just wrong, it's criminal." Maya felt overwhelmed. The past week had been a nightmare of legal threats, financial worries, and media attention she'd never wanted. The idea that someone with real power might actually be on her side seemed too good to believe. "What kind of help?" she asked cautiously. Marcus sat back down, leaning forward intently. "Legal representation first. The best lawyers money can buy, people who specialize in taking on corporate bullies. Financial support for your medical bills, and lost wages not as charity, but as an investment in justice. And, most importantly, the resources to investigate what really happened at that hospital." "I don't want charity," Maya said, echoing his words. "I've worked for everything I have." "This isn't charity," Marcus repeated. "This is a debt, the most important debt of my life." He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. Look, on the screen was Keisha Webb, looking healthy and radiant in what appeared to be her family's living room. She was holding a crayon drawing that showed a stick figure in scrubs with angel wings. "Tell Maya what you want to say." Marcus's voice came from behind the camera. Keisha's face grew serious, and she looked directly into the lens. "Maya, Thank you for saving my life. I love you, and I want to grow up to be a nurse just like you. You're my hero." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the video. This was why she'd become a nurse for moments like this, for the chance to help children grow up healthy and strong. "She talks about you every day," Marcus said softly. "She tells everyone about Angel Maya who kept her safe. And when I told her that some bad people were trying to hurt you, she asked me why I wasn't helping the angel who saved her life." "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes grown-ups are cowards, but that I was going to try to be braver." Marcus's voice was steady now, filled with conviction. "Maya, I've spent my entire career in corporate America. I know how these people think, how they operate, what they're afraid of, and I know how to fight them." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd told her. The offer was overwhelming, more help than she'd ever imagined possible. But there was something else. Something that made her trust this man who'd appeared at her door like an answer to prayers she'd been afraid to pray. "Why now?" she asked. "You could have sent lawyers from Atlanta. You didn't have to come here yourself." Marcus's composure finally cracked, and Maya saw the raw emotion he'd been trying to control. "Because I needed to look you in the eye and say thank you. Because I needed to see the woman who was willing to die for my daughter and tell her that she's not alone in this fight." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. But instead of handing it to her, he wrote something on the back. "This is my personal cell phone number. I want you to call me if you need anything at all. Legal help, financial support, or just someone to talk to who understands what you're up against." Maya took the card with trembling fingers. "Marcus, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Say you'll let me be part of making sure they don't destroy you for saving my child." Maya thought about the past week, the threats from hospital lawyers, the mounting medical bills, her mother working double shifts to make ends meet while Maya recovered. She thought about the insurance company trying to deny her claim, about David Sterling's shark-like smile as he'd threatened her nursing license. And she thought about 6 children who were alive and healthy because she'd made a choice to stand between them and violence. "Okay," she said quietly. "Yes, I'll let you help." Marcus's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Thank you. We're going to make them pay for what they've done to you, Maya. We're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." As he stood to leave, Maya realized that something fundamental had just changed. For the first time since the shooting, she didn't feel alone and powerless against an overwhelming system. She had an ally now, someone with the resources and determination to fight back. "Marcus?" she called as he reached the door. "Will you tell Keisha something for me? Anything. Tell her that Angel Maya says she's going to grow up to be an amazing nurse, and that I'm proud of her for being so brave." Marcus nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll tell her. And Maya? She's going to be so proud when I tell her that her angel is the bravest person I've ever met." After he left, Maya sat on her couch staring at his business card. In 2 days, everything had changed. She was no longer just a nurse trying to recover from a traumatic incident. She was the center of a story that had captured national attention, a symbol of something larger than herself. But more than that, she was no longer alone. The law firm of Morrison Chen Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown Detroit tower, the kind of place Maya Rodriguez had never imagined herself entering. As she walked through the marble lobby 2 days after Marcus Webb's visit, she felt like she was stepping into another world, one where people fought corporate giants as a profession rather than as a desperate last resort. The elevator whisked her up to the 42nd floor, where Sarah Morrison herself was waiting. Morrison was a woman in her 50s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from winning battles against seemingly impossible odds. She'd built her reputation taking on healthcare corporations, pharmaceutical companies, and insurance giants that thought they could crush individual plaintiffs through sheer financial intimidation. "Ms. Rodriguez," Morrison said, extending her hand. "I've been following your case. What they're doing to you is unconscionable." Maya shook the lawyer's hand, still feeling surreal about the entire situation. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a pediatric nurse whose biggest legal concern was whether she could afford to renew her nursing license. Now she was sitting in a conference room that overlooked the Detroit River, discussing strategy with lawyers who charged more per hour than Maya made in a month. Also present was James Chen, Morrison's partner and a specialist in employment law, along with Rebecca Martinez, an investigative paralegal who'd already compiled a thick folder of documents about St. Luke, Catherine's hospital and its parent company, Medicorp. "Let's start with the basics," Morrison said, opening Maya's file. "Marcus Webb has briefed us on the situation, but I want to hear your version of events." Maya told her story again: the shooting, her decision to shield the children, the hospital's attempts to pressure her into signing a non-disclosure agreement. She'd told it so many times now that it almost felt like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. "And they've denied your workers' compensation claim?" Chen asked. "They said my actions were outside the scope of my employment," Maya confirmed. "That nurses aren't supposed to confront armed intruders." Morrison and Chen exchanged glances. Rebecca Martinez spoke up for the first time. "We've been investigating Medicorp's practices at their other facilities. This isn't an isolated incident." She opened her laptop and projected a presentation onto the wall screen. "In the past 5 years, Medicorp has been involved in 12 similar cases across their hospital network. Healthcare workers injured while dealing with security situations that could have been prevented with proper staffing and equipment." The screen showed a map of the Midwest with red dots marking Medicorp facilities. Toledo, Ohio, a nurse was assaulted by a patient because they'd eliminated overnight security to cut costs. Cleveland, a doctor was stabbed while trying to restrain an agitated psychiatric patient because they didn't have enough security staff. Indianapolis, "I get the picture," Maya said quietly. "This is their standard operating procedure." "Exactly," Morrison confirmed. "Cut costs, put employees at risk, then blame the employees when something goes wrong. It's corporate sociopathy disguised as fiscal responsibility." Chen leaned forward. "Maya, we believe we can build a case that goes far beyond workers' compensation. This is about deliberate indifference to employee safety, retaliation against a whistleblower, and possibly civil rights violations." "Civil rights? You're being punished for protecting children," Martinez explained. "That's a form of speech protected by the First Amendment. The hospital's attempts to silence you and discredit your actions could constitute a violation of your constitutional rights." Maya felt a familiar wave of anxiety. "This is getting bigger than I wanted it to get." Morrison's expression softened. "Maya, I understand that you never intended to become a public figure, but sometimes individual cases become symbols of larger problems that need to be addressed. Your case could protect other healthcare workers who find themselves in similar situations." Before Maya could respond, Morrison's assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Ms. Morrison, there's a situation downstairs you should know about." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they could see protesters gathering in the plaza below the building. But these weren't the supportive demonstrators who'd been gathering at St. Catherine's. These people carried signs reading, "Maya Rodriguez, hero or fraud," and "Stop the shakedown." "What the hell?" Maya breathed. Martinez was already typing on her laptop. "Professional astroturfing operation? This has Medicorp's fingerprints all over it." She pulled up social media posts showing the same protest signs at similar demonstrations in other cities where Medicorp was facing legal challenges. They hire public relations firms to manufacture grassroots opposition to lawsuits. Make it look like regular people are upset about frivolous litigation. Chen was on his phone, speaking in urgent whispers. He hung up and turned to the group. "My contact at Channel 7 says they received an anonymous tip about inconsistencies in Maya's story. Someone leaked security footage that supposedly shows she escalated the situation." Maya's stomach dropped. "What footage? I thought the hospital said they were cooperating fully." "Edited footage," Morrison said grimly. "They've probably spliced together clips to make it look like you acted aggressively or endangered patients. It's a standard dirty trick." Through the windows, Maya could see news vans pulling up to the plaza. The manufactured protest was already drawing media attention, just as it was designed to do. Morrison stood up decisively. "This changes our timeline. They're not just trying to intimidate you anymore, they're trying to destroy your credibility before we can get to court. What do? We fight back. James, I want you to file for emergency injunctive relief to prevent them from releasing any more edited footage without court supervision. Rebecca, contact every media outlet that's covered this story and warn them about the manipulation." She turned to Maya. "And you, my dear, are going to give the performance of your lifetime." An hour later, Maya stood in front of Morrison's office building, facing a crowd of reporters and cameras. Her legs were shaking, and she could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool October air. She'd never spoken to media before, never wanted to be in the spotlight. But as she looked at the crowd, including some of the obviously paid protesters holding their professional-looking signs, Maya thought about Keisha Webb's drawing of an angel nurse. She thought about the other 5 children who'd been in the ICU that night. She thought about her mother, who'd raised her to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. "My name is Maya Rodriguez," she began, her voice quiet but carrying clearly through the microphones. "3 weeks ago, I was just a pediatric nurse who loved taking care of sick children. I never wanted to be famous, never wanted to be on television, never wanted to be involved in lawsuits or legal battles. She paused, gathering her courage. But on that night, when a man with a gun walked into the room where 6 children lay connected to life support machines, I had a choice. I could run and save myself, or I could stay and protect them. I stayed. I took 3 bullets, and I would take 3 more if it meant those children got to go home to their families. Her voice was growing stronger, more confident. Now, the hospital that employed me, the hospital that failed to protect those children with proper security, is trying to destroy my reputation because I won't stay quiet about their failures. They're paying people to hold signs calling me a fraud. They're editing security footage to make it look like I'm the villain in this story. Maya looked directly into the cameras. But I know the truth, and so do the families of those 6 children. I know that every single one of those babies is alive today, healthy and safe with their parents, because someone was willing to stand between them and violence. And no amount of corporate lawyers or manufactured protests or edited video footage can change that fact. She turned and walked back into the building, leaving the reporters shouting questions behind her. Her hands were shaking as she pressed the elevator button, but for the first time since this nightmare began, Maya Rodriguez felt like she was fighting back. The edited security footage hit social media at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, perfectly timed for maximum impact during the evening news cycle. Medicorp's public relations team had crafted it with surgical precision, 30 seconds of grainy black and white video that seemed to show Maya Rodriguez moving aggressively toward the gunman rather than defensively, protecting the children. Maya was at home when her phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages, voice calls, social media mentions, a digital avalanche of attention that quickly turned ugly. The hashtag #MayaTheShield, which had been overwhelmingly positive, was now flooded with accusations of fraud, attention-seeking, and crisis acting. "Turn on Channel 4, Marcus Webb said when she answered his call. His voice was tight with anger. Maya fumbled for the remote and found the local news station, where anchor Brad Morrison, no relation to her lawyer, was introducing a Channel 4 exclusive investigation. Tonight, new questions about the so-called hero nurse whose story has captured national attention, Morrison said in his practiced television voice. Exclusive security footage obtained by Channel 4 appears to show a different version of events than what Maya Rodriguez has publicly claimed. The video played in slow motion, with dramatic music and a narrator explaining how Maya could be seen advancing aggressively toward the armed suspect and potentially escalating the situation. To viewers who hadn't seen the full footage, it looked damning. Maya's phone rang again. Rosa Martinez from the Detroit Free Press. "Maya, don't panic," Rosa said before Maya could speak. "I've seen the full footage. This is a hatchet job, pure and simple. They've cut out everything that shows you protecting the children and only included the moments where you were trying to position yourself between the gunman and the beds." "But it looks terrible," Maya said, watching herself on television with growing horror. "It looks like I was attacking him. To people who don't know the full story, maybe. But we're going to fix that." The counteroffensive began immediately. Rosa Martinez published a detailed analysis of the edited footage compared to the full security recording, which her sources at the police department had provided under condition of anonymity. The article, headlined, "How a Hospital Corporation Weaponized Video Editing Against a Hero Nurse," went viral within hours. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Maya's former supervisor, finally broke her silence in an interview with the Detroit Free Press. "I was there that night," she said. "I saw everything. Maya Rodriguez saved 6 children's lives, and anyone suggesting otherwise is either lying or profoundly misinformed." But Medicorp had resources that dwarfed anything Maya's supporters could muster. They hired Blackstone Strategic Communications, a Washington, D.C., based firm that specialized in crisis management for large corporations facing public relations disasters. Within 48 hours, they had deployed a sophisticated media campaign designed to shift public opinion. Professional talking heads appeared on cable news shows questioning Maya's true motives. Op-ed pieces ran in newspapers across the Midwest, suggesting that her legal case was a cash grab that would drive up healthcare costs for working families. Social media accounts with no posting history suddenly became active, flooding comment sections with skepticism about Maya's character and claims. Richard Blackstone himself embarked on a carefully orchestrated media tour, appearing on 3 different television programs in one day. His message was consistent and carefully crafted. St. Catherine's was the real victim here, a community hospital being unfairly attacked by lawyers seeking a big payday. "We support our employees completely," Blackstone said during an appearance on Detroit Morning Talk. "But we also have to be realistic about what happened that night. Our security protocols worked exactly as designed. The situation was contained with minimal casualties because our staff followed their training. When pressed about Maya's actions, Blackstone's tone became somber and concerned. Look, no one questions Ms. Rodriguez's courage or her good intentions. But courage without proper training can sometimes make dangerous situations worse. We can't have healthcare workers thinking they should confront armed criminals. That's not safe for anyone. The interviewer, clearly influenced by pre-interview briefing materials, nodded sympathetically. And now she's suing the hospital? Unfortunately, yes. Despite our best efforts to work with her and support her recovery, she's chosen to pursue litigation that could seriously impact our ability to serve the community. It's heartbreaking, really. Maya watched the interview from her apartment, feeling sick to her stomach. Blackstone was so smooth, so reasonable sounding, that even she might have believed him if she hadn't lived through the actual events. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Police Chief Donald Reeves announced that the Detroit Police Department was launching an internal investigation into irregularities in the initial incident report. We've received information suggesting that certain aspects of this case may have been mischaracterized in official reports, Chief Reeves said during a press conference. In the interest of maintaining public trust and ensuring accurate records, we're conducting a thorough review. Detective Sarah Chen, who had become one of Maya's strongest supporters, was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. The message was clear. Even the cops who had supported Maya were being neutralized. The public mood began to shift. Comment sections that had once been filled with praise for Maya now contained increasing numbers of skeptical posts. Local radio talk shows featured callers questioning whether the whole story had been exaggerated. A poll commissioned by a local television station showed that 43% of Detroit residents now had doubts about Maya's version of events. Maya felt the weight of the assault on her character like a physical presence. She stopped reading social media, stopped watching the news, stopped answering calls from reporters. Her mother found her sitting in their dark living room one evening, staring at nothing. "Mija, you have to fight back," Maria said gently. "These people, they lie about you, but we know the truth." "What if people believe them?" Maya whispered. "What if everyone thinks I'm a fraud? Then we show them who you really are." The next morning brought an unexpected gift. Marcus Webb called to tell Maya to turn on the Today Show, where a segment was beginning titled, "Six Families Speak Out." One by one, the parents of the children Maya had saved appeared on national television to tell their stories. They spoke simply and powerfully about what had happened that night, about watching Maya put herself between their children and death. Keisha Webb, now fully recovered from her heart surgery, appeared with her parents. At 8 years old, she was articulate and compelling as she showed her drawing of Angel Maya to the cameras. "She saved my life," Keisha said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She got hurt protecting me and the other kids. She's a hero." Tommy Martinez's mother wept as she described finding her son safe and unharmed because Maya had refused to abandon him. Sarah Chen's father, a construction worker with calloused hands and a shy demeanor, looked directly into the camera and said, "That young lady took bullets for my daughter. Anyone who says she's not a hero can come explain it to me personally." The segment ended with all 6 families standing together, holding a banner that read, "Maya Rodriguez, our children's guardian angel." Maya watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. Whatever happened next, whatever corporate lawyers or public relations firms tried to do to her, she would always have this: the absolute knowledge that 6 families slept peacefully at night because she had chosen courage over safety. The breaking point came on a frigid November morning when Richard Blackstone made the mistake of confronting Maya Rodriguez in public. Maya had been attending a community meeting at the Riverside Community Center, where local residents were discussing healthcare access in underserved neighborhoods. She'd been invited to speak about her experiences as a nurse working with low-income families, but the conversation had inevitably turned to the shooting and its aftermath. "What we're seeing," Maya had told the crowd of about 60 people, "is a hospital system that prioritizes profit over patients and then attacks its own employees when they try to do the right thing." She was limping toward the exit, still favoring her injured leg, when Blackstone appeared in the parking lot with Jim Walsh, and 2 men Maya didn't recognize: expensive suits, earpieces, the look of private security. "Ms. Rodriguez," Blackstone called out, his voice carrying across the asphalt. "I think it's time we had a frank conversation." Maya stopped, her keys in her hand, and turned to face him. A few people from the meeting had followed her outside and were watching the confrontation with interest. "Mr. Blackstone," she said calmly, "I don't think we have anything to discuss. Blackstone's carefully maintained corporate demeanor was beginning to crack. The past month had not gone well for him. Medicorp's stock price had dropped 12%. 3 board members had called for his resignation. The federal investigation that Marcus Webb's lawyers had triggered was uncovering embarrassing details about cost-cutting measures across the entire hospital chain. "You're destroying people's lives," Blackstone said, stepping closer to Maya. "Do you understand that? Good people who work at that hospital, who depend on their jobs, who serve the community, you're putting all of them at risk with your crusade." "I'm putting them at risk?" Maya's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath the calm. "Mr. Blackstone, you cut security staff by 60%. You disabled metal detectors to save money on electricity. You created a situation where a gunman could walk into a children's hospital and start shooting babies. That's not— And when one of your employees took 3 bullets to fix the problem you created," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger, "your first response was to threaten her job and try to make her sign papers saying it was her fault." A small crowd was gathering now. People had pulled out phones and were recording the confrontation. Maya could see the live stream notifications popping up on various social media platforms. Blackstone's face was flushed red now, his composure completely abandoned. "You don't understand the complexities of running a healthcare system. You think it's simple, but there are regulations, insurance requirements, budget constraints." "I understand that 6 children are alive because I was willing to die for them," Maya interrupted. "And I understand that you've spent more money trying to destroy me than you would have spent on proper security in the first place." "We offered you a settlement," Blackstone shouted, no longer caring who was watching. "A generous settlement that would have set you up for life. But that wasn't enough, was it? You had to have your moment in the spotlight, had to be the hero." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Maya looked at this man, this wealthy, powerful executive who controlled the healthcare for thousands of people, and realized that he genuinely believed he was the victim in this story. "Mr. Blackstone," she said softly, "I never wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to take care of sick children and help them get better and go home to their families. You could have let me do that. You could have paid my medical bills, improved your security, and moved on with your life." She took a step closer to him, and despite the size difference, he was 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. Blackstone instinctively backed away. "But you chose to attack me instead. You chose to threaten my career, my livelihood, my family. You chose to make me a public figure by trying to destroy me publicly." Maya's voice was calm, but it carried clearly across the parking lot. "I didn't start this war, Mr. Blackstone, but I'm going to finish it." Blackstone opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked around at the crowd of people filming him, at the faces showing everything from disgust to outright hostility, and seemed to realize for the first time that he'd lost control of the narrative completely. "This isn't over," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Yes, it is," Maya replied. "You just don't know it yet." The video of the confrontation was online within minutes and viral within hours. Blackstone vs. Maya trended on Twitter as people shared the footage of a corporate CEO publicly threatening a nurse who'd taken bullets to save children. The optics were devastating. A rich, powerful man bullying a young woman who was still visibly recovering from gunshot wounds. But the confrontation did something else. It finally broke the dam of silence that had protected Medicorp's secrets. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Maya's former supervisor, went on the record with a detailed account of the pressure she'd faced from hospital administration to disparage Maya's actions. She provided emails showing Blackstone's direct involvement in the campaign to discredit Maya, including instructions to make her look unstable and question her judgment. Jim Walsh, the head of security, appeared on CNN the next morning to announce his resignation from St. Catharines. "I can't be part of this anymore," he told Anderson Cooper. "Maya Rodriguez is a hero, and watching my bosses try to destroy her has made me sick to my stomach." Walsh revealed that he'd been keeping records of all the cost-cutting measures that had compromised security at the hospital. Metal detectors disabled not for maintenance but to save 28-0 annually. Security staff cut from 12 to 4 on overnight shifts. Broken locks on restricted access doors that hadn't been repaired for months. They knew the hospital wasn't secure, Walsh said. Everyone in administration knew. But the budget numbers looked good, and that's all they cared about. The revelation that triggered the avalanche came from an unexpected source. Rebecca Martinez, the investigative paralegal working with Maya's legal team, had been digging through Medicorp's financial records as part of the discovery process. What she found was devastating. Richard Blackstone had received a $2.3 million bonus in the same quarter when security cuts were implemented at St. Catherine's. The cost savings from those cuts, 890 annually, had been directly cited in the performance metrics that justified his bonus. In other words, Blackstone had been financially rewarded for creating the conditions that led to the shooting. The story broke simultaneously in the Detroit Free Press and the Wall Street Journal, with the headline, "CEO profited from hospital security cuts that enabled shooting." It included internal Medicorp documents showing that safety concerns raised by staff had been dismissed as budget negativity, and that Blackstone had personally approved the decision to operate with minimal overnight security. The reaction was swift and brutal. Medicorp's board of directors held an emergency meeting and announced Blackstone's immediate resignation to focus on his family and personal interests. The company agreed to pay a $50 million settlement and to avoid federal charges, with $15 million going directly to Maya and an additional $35 million funding hospital security upgrades across the entire Medicorp network. Police Chief Donald Reeves, whose investigation of Maya had been an obvious attempt to curry favor with powerful interests, found himself facing a corruption investigation of his own. Detective Sarah Chen, who'd been placed on administrative leave for supporting Maya, was reinstated with a promotion and a public apology. But for Maya, the most important vindication came in a simpler form. Dr. Harper called to offer her a new position as patient advocate at stpointversants.com. Catherine's, with a mandate to ensure that patient safety concerns were heard and addressed at the highest levels of hospital administration. "It's not just about you anymore," Dr. Harper explained. "This case has changed how hospitals across the country think about employee safety and corporate responsibility. You've made a difference that's going to protect people for years to come." Maya accepted the position, but with one condition. She wanted to spend at least part of her time working directly with pediatric patients. Because at the end of everything, all the lawsuits and media attention and corporate battles, she was still a nurse who loved taking care of sick children. 6 months after Richard Blackstone's public humiliation in the community center parking lot, Maya Rodriguez stood in the lobby of St. Catherine's Community Hospital, watching workers install a bronze plaque near the main entrance. The inscription read, "In recognition of the courage of Maya Rodriguez and all healthcare workers who put patient safety above personal risk." The hospital had been transformed under new leadership. CEO Jennifer Park, a former pediatric surgeon who'd built her reputation on patient advocacy rather than profit maximization, had implemented sweeping changes. Security staff had been tripled, metal detectors were operational 24/7, and every employee had access to a direct safety hotline that bypassed administration and went straight to the board of directors. Maya's role as patient advocate had evolved into something larger than anyone had originally envisioned. She'd established the Healthcare Worker Protection Foundation with funding from her settlement, providing legal support and financial assistance to medical professionals who faced retaliation for reporting safety concerns. "Maya?" Dr. Harper approached with a tablet in her hands and a smile on her face. "The board just approved funding for the new pediatric security wing, full-time guards, panic buttons in every room, and reinforced access controls." Maya nodded, feeling the satisfaction that came from turning trauma into positive change. "Any word on the other hospitals?" 12 facilities across 3 states have implemented what they're calling the Maya Protocol enhanced security measures, specifically designed to protect vulnerable patient populations. The changes went beyond St. Catherine's. Maya's case had triggered congressional hearings on healthcare worker safety, leading to new federal regulations requiring hospitals to maintain minimum security standards. The story had inspired healthcare workers nationwide to speak up about unsafe conditions, knowing they had legal protections that hadn't existed before. But the most meaningful changes were often the smallest ones. Maya walked through the hospital now and saw differences that might be invisible to visitors, but were profoundly important to staff. Panic buttons disguised as pagers, security cameras in previously blind spots, and most importantly, a culture where safety concerns were treated as urgent priorities rather than budget inconveniences. "Miss Maya! Miss Maya!" Maya turned to see Keisha Webb running down the hallway, her parents following more sedately behind. At 9 years old, Keisha had fully recovered from her heart surgery and had grown into a confident, energetic child who visited the hospital regularly, not as a patient, but as a volunteer who read stories to younger children in the pediatric wing. "Keisha, what are you doing here on a Saturday?" "Daddy brought me to see the new reading room," Keisha announced proudly. "The one they named after you?" Maya glanced at Marcus Webb, who smiled sheepishly. "I may have made a small additional donation to the hospital's children's programs." The Maya Rodriguez reading room seemed like an appropriate tribute. Marcus had become more than an ally. He'd become a close friend and partner in Maya's advocacy work. His pharmaceutical company had established new ethical guidelines for hospital partnerships, refusing to work with facilities that didn't meet enhanced safety standards. He'd also joined the board of Maya's foundation, bringing corporate expertise and connections that helped them support healthcare workers across the country. "Can we go see it?" Keisha asked excitedly. "I want to read the first book." As they walked toward the pediatric wing, Maya reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The scared, overwhelmed nurse who'd signed up for night shifts to pay off student loans had become a national advocate for healthcare worker rights. The shy young woman who'd never wanted public attention was now scheduled to speak at medical conferences and congressional hearings. The reading room was beautiful, bright, and cheerful, with comfortable seating areas and shelves lined with donated books. A large window looked out onto a garden where children could sit and read when weather permitted. The dedication plaque by the door bore a quote Maya had suggested: "Every child deserves to feel safe while healing." "It's perfect," Maya said softly, watching Keisha settle into a reading chair with a picture book about brave princesses. Marcus stood beside her, observing his daughter with the quiet pride of a parent who'd almost lost everything and been given a second chance. "She wants to be a nurse when she grows up," he said. "Says she wants to be just like you." "She's already braver than I am," Maya replied. "She survived heart surgery and came out of it wanting to help other kids feel better. That's pure heroism right there." Dr. Harper joined them, carrying a stack of papers that Maya recognized as incident reports. "The monthly safety review," she explained. 0 security incidents, 15 safety concerns reported through the new system, all addressed within 48 hours. "We've gone from one of the least secure facilities in the region to one of the safest." Maya took the reports, still sometimes amazed that her signature now appeared on official hospital documents as the patient safety advocate. "Any patterns I should be aware of?" "Actually, yes. We're getting calls from hospitals in other cities asking for consultation on implementing similar programs. Apparently, word is spreading about our success." This was perhaps the most gratifying development of all. Maya's story had begun with one moment of courage in a crisis, but it was evolving into a systematic approach to protecting healthcare workers and patients alike. Every hospital that implemented enhanced safety measures, every healthcare worker who felt empowered to report dangerous conditions, every patient who received care in a more secure environment, all of it traced back to that night, when a young nurse had decided that protecting children was worth any risk. "Miss Maya?" Keisha had finished her story and was looking up expectantly. "Will you read the next one with me?" Maya settled into the chair beside Keisha, accepting the book, a story about a little girl who wanted to be a doctor. As she began to read aloud, Maya was aware of the other changes in her life that had nothing to do with advocacy or public recognition. Her mother Maria had been able to quit her night cleaning job and take a position in the hospital's housekeeping department, better hours, better pay, and health insurance that actually covered their needs. Maya had moved them both into a small but comfortable apartment in a safer neighborhood, close enough to the hospital for Maya to walk to work. The legal settlement had provided financial security, but more importantly, it had given Maya the freedom to focus on work that mattered rather than just work that paid the bills. She still worked in the pediatric ICU 2 days a week, maintaining her connection to direct patient care, but the rest of her time was spent on advocacy, policy development, and supporting other healthcare workers facing similar challenges. As Keisha turned the pages of the storybook, Maya thought about the ripple effects of that night 6 months ago. 6 children had gone home safely to their families. Dozens of hospitals had improved their security. Hundreds of healthcare workers had received protection and support through her foundation. Thousands of patients were receiving care in safer environments. But perhaps most importantly, the story had sent a message that resonated far beyond healthcare. Ordinary people could stand up to powerful institutions and win if they had the courage to speak truth and the persistence to keep fighting. "The end," Keisha announced as they finished the story. "That was a good one. The little girl became a doctor and saved lots of people, just like you." Maya hugged Keisha gently. "And someday you're going to save lots of people too." "I hope so," Keisha said seriously. "I want to help kids who are scared, like I was, and I want to be brave like you were." Looking into the earnest eyes of this remarkable child, this living, breathing reminder of why courage mattered, Maya felt a deep sense of peace. The battles weren't over. There would always be more hospitals to reform, more workers to protect, more systems to change. But she'd proven something important to herself and to the world. Sometimes one person's refusal to accept injustice could change everything. As they left the reading room, Maya noticed that the afternoon light streaming through the windows cast their shadows long across the floor, two figures, one small and one larger, walking together toward whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead.